I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today I'm going to tell you why the Passat 206 TSI is the best car Volkswagen currently make. The Passat 206 TSI is a real sleeper on the Australian market. Basically, what this is a Passat station wagon with a 206 kilowatt 2-litre turbocharged petrol engine under the bonnet with all-wheel drive and a 6-speed dual-clutch automatic transmission. And as we'll find out when we take the 206 TSI out onto the road, this car really shrinks around you and becomes an absolute driver's car when you don't want to relax, that is, because this vehicle has a better Jekyll and Hyde personality than almost any other car I've driven at this price, which is around $70,000 drive away. But calling it Volkswagen's best car is a bold claim. But in this video, I hope to back it up by showing you that the Passat is a seriously refined vehicle that transforms into a very fun family car to drive when you want it to be. But it's big, it's spacious, it's everything you'd want in a fast wagon, essentially. And doesn't it look good in facelifted 2021 form? You can now get a Golf R color on the Passat 206 TSI. This is lapis blue, looks really nice paired with the chrome touches you get on the Passat and the new matte grey Pretoria 19-inch wheels. One of my favorite wheel designs that Volkswagen makes. Again, a Golf R touch added to the Passat. Why is it so Golf R-y? That's because there is no Passat R. There's an Arteon R overseas, which may or may not come to Australia. But in terms of the traditional Passat, this is as hot as it gets. And in a real nod to enthusiasts, the top spec Passat, the fastest Passat, is only available as a station wagon. And when we get inside this car, you'll see how that decision pays dividends. But while the Passat is handsome and big and practical, all the things you can tell from looking at it outside, the reason this is the best Volkswagen on the market here in Australia is actually found here in the interior and later when we take it out on the road, where the driving dynamics are just so creamy and well adapted to the kinds of roads we have here in Australia. But we'll start by talking about the cabin, which is a best of breed example of why Volkswagen can do excellent interiors when they want to. And that's where technology isn't allowed to completely dominate the experience, and instead the hardware and the fixtures and the fittings are of the highest quality for a mainstream brand. And it's why, in some ways, I was a bit disappointed by the Mark 8 Golf, because I feel like there's been a step back from benchmarks like this car. But there's also no avoiding that the Passat is special to Volkswagen. This is their flagship passenger wagon, if you like. It's kind of the passenger wagon equivalent of the Touareg. It doesn't ride on a rear-wheel drive platform like that SUV does, but it's still clearly a high-end VW, higher end than a Golf or a Tiguan, that's for sure. And you can tell that in the interior, which is both more refined to look at with this really gorgeous full-length air vent style design here, and just built really, really expensively. The quality in here is excellent. We've got a new steering wheel for 2021, perforated leather, paddle shifted, but unlike the high-spec versions of the new Golf, we have real buttons on this steering wheel, which makes it easier to use on the go. Similarly, we have Volkswagen's older 9.2-inch touchscreen here. The thing about this touchscreen is it works a lot better than the new touchscreens in the Golf and the Skoda Octavia. The touch targets are way easier to hit, the whole screen is snappier, and yet it still has wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto for 2021. So this is the best of all worlds in terms of the infotainment. Similarly, we have a real climate panel beneath it. Those features aren't buried in the touchscreen like they are in the new Golf, and it works better. Sure, this climate panel isn't as good as the previous version of the Passat, which had real dials for fan speed and temperature. It is still touch-based now, but because we have actual touch targets for fan, temperature, heated seats, all of that sort of thing, it's just easier to use on the go. In front of the driver, we have a virtual cockpit. It's again a generation behind. It's not quite as good as the new virtual cockpit on the Mark 8 Golf, but it still works super well. Nice and easy to use. You can put a full map in front of you. You can customize it pretty much to your heart's content. We've also got a real gear shifter, not the little knobby thing that the Volkswagen Group are putting on all of their cars. So the best new car to buy is a new car that's been out for a number of years already. It's proven, it's tried and tested. That's what this Passat feels like. It feels like the best of what Volkswagen were doing a few years ago, but in a package that's been lightly updated for the current era. And that's very appealing to me, at least. You can let me know what you think down below. In terms of seats, they're very comfortable. So they're sporty R-Line seats, Napa leather, so they feel expensive and plush and comfy. Unfortunately, with the R-Line, you can only get a black interior. The trim that sits below this car is the 162 TSI Elegance, which is front-wheel drive. But with that car, you can choose black or cream inside, and the cream really gives it a lift. I don't like the carbon fiber effect to this leather, which is certainly not saving any weight, and it looks tacky in my opinion, but I think I could live with it because the balance of the interior is really quite good. However, being black leather, it's a shame that the R-Line misses out on cooled seats, which is bizarre. Other Passats have that feature. But the materials, soft and squidgy everywhere you go, metal trim running the length of the dash and the doors, and we've got the new Harman Kardon stereo, which is a step up in clarity from the previous DIN audio system. Lastly, practicality is fairly good. Flockline door bins, big cup holders, an adjustable armrest over an okay sized center bin. Unfortunately though, we don't have wireless smartphone charging. Instead, the tray ahead of the shifter is just bare storage, and because we have wireless CarPlay, that makes it a little bit more cumbersome that you have to plug your phone into the USB-C ports to charge it while using wireless CarPlay. But the one thing I'll say in the Passat's defense is that most wireless charging systems that we test fail to securely hold a phone and keep charging it consistently. So in many ways, with the power demands of wireless CarPlay, which are significant, wireless charging often doesn't keep your phone topped up enough to keep using wireless CarPlay on a long drive. So perhaps USB-C wired fast charging is more realistic. Anyway, you can let me know what you think. I'm going to jump in the back seat. Here's where the Passat 206 TSI will make sense to your other half if you've got kids. That's because it's absolutely massive here in the back seat, bigger than a Tiguan. Yes, the Passat is not a 7-seater like a Tiguan All-Space, but that just means you won't have to carry other people's ratty children as well. You'll have an excuse. Anyway, the space on offer is generous enough for adults, let alone kids. I'm 6 foot. I've got another couple of inches of headroom despite the huge panoramic sunroof on this spec. Legroom's awesome, tow room's really good. The middle seat is just about usable, even though the hump in the floor is pretty large. In terms of amenities, we've got a flip down armrest. We've got 2.5 cup holders there. We've got air vents here in the back, a separate climate zone, a third USB-C port, and a 12-volt socket that you can stick another couple of USB ports in if you needed that many devices. Plus, we've got soft materials here in the back, unlike most Volkswagens, and we have integrated sun blinds, which on a pretty sunny day like today is a bit of a godsend. Plus, both front seats have map pockets in them. We've got soft and squidgy door pulls. All in all, it feels like a pretty refined and luxurious experience. Around the back, the Passat is still a pretty subtle and understated design. The facelift does pick up some changes. We've got new taillight graphics here, full LED. We've got lettering in the center, new Volkswagen badge, new 4Motion badge. You know, personally, if I was buying the car, I'd probably debadge Passat and 4Motion and just go full Germany spec, but that's me. Then down here, we do have this new sort of garnish, the fake quad tailpipes. This has always interested me because the Passat 206 TSI actually does have 4 real tailpipes under there. I think just putting rounder finishes on them would look good and a little bit more true, but anyway. Opening up the power tailgate is nice and simple. It's quick, and we see why the Passat is just so practical. The 3 chasing cars suitcases, I mean, it's no argument that they all fit in easily. That's because we have a 650 litre boot in this car, bigger than SUVs of the same sort of size and cost. Underneath this boot floor, very impressively, we have a full-size 19-inch spare wheel. We've got cubby spaces off to the left and right. We've got a really nice, substantial, fake leather actually, cargo cover, and remote releases for the rear seats, plus of course electric controls to lower the boot. Last thing before we take the 206 TSI out on the road is a chat about running costs. So what does it cost to run a Passat 206 TSI? Well, the cheapest way to do it is actually to buy a service pack up front when you purchase the car. 5 years costs $2,500. That's a discount of about $1,100 over paying for servicing each year when you turn up, and the intervals are 12 months or 15,000 kilometers for this car. And that price for a relatively complicated dual clutch European station wagon is actually fairly decent. Fuel consumption is manageable, about 9.5 litres per 100 Ks in mixed driving. You'll do 6.5 litres per 100 Ks on the highway, obviously getting into the teens if you exploit the performance potential of this car. And the warranty on the Passat, like all Volkswagens in Australia, is 5 years with unlimited kilometres. So what is the Passat 206 TSI like to drive? Well, I've brought it to one of my favourite country roads to find out. Quick would be the first word. Now, quick and fast are quite different things. Certainly Volkswagen make faster cars. The new Golf R, for example, will have a higher top speed than the governed limit on the Passat 206 TSI. Equally, VW make quicker cars than the Passat R-Line Wagon. This vehicle will comfortably return a 0 to 100 time somewhere in the 5-second range, but the new Golf R, again, will be capable of around the sub 4-second mark. But the point is that for the kind of car that this is, a large, practical family vehicle that's also very comfortable, it's remarkably quick in a range of situations. Straight line, sure. You know, the strong engine combined with the quick dual clutch automatic means that you'll beat some people in the stoplight drag race, but it's really on roads like this, Australian B roads, which tend to be slightly variable in elevation, but just tight, technical, interesting roads. And the surfacing doesn't get a huge amount of attention. So the surfacing can be very, very changeable, occasionally washed out, and it rewards cars that have an extremely high level of cohesion in their chassis tune. Roads like the one I'm on now really show up a vehicle which probably hadn't really finished its suspension calibration, and it was just released onto the market too early. We see that quite a lot. The Passat 206 TSI R-Line is not one of those vehicles, however. You can tell that this car has had the full works treatment from Volkswagen. And that's despite the fact that Passat isn't even a product of R GmbH, which is now entirely in-house at Volkswagen. But typically, Volkswagen's R-badged cars, the full-fat R cars, have had a slightly separate development process. To the contrary, the Passat 206 TSI is just an R-Line, so it is a standard series production Passat with a stronger engine and, you know, a package of alterations outside and inside, more or less. And yet, this is a comfortably superior car to drive than any other Passat. The underlying chassis, the underlying model is really impressive for the mid-size segment. It'd be up there with, you know, one of our clear recommendations. But the Passat 206 TSI is on another level again. Now, of course, it starts with the engine. You know, this engine used to be referred to as the Golf R tune because at the time the Passat 206 came out, the Golf R was also making 206 kilowatts of power. Now, it's a little bit misleading these days because the Golf R has well and truly moved on. Even in Mark 7.5 form, the Golf R had started to make 213 kilowatts. Whereas here in the Passat, we are stuck on 206 kilowatts of power and 350 newton meters of torque. Still, that's plenty of shove for a vehicle of this sort that doesn't, you know, purport to be in the same league as something like an Audi S4, Mercedes C43, BMW M340i, that sort of thing. Instead, this is designed to be a very quick 4-cylinder car because the MQB platform that the Passat sits on is transverse, and with a few small exceptions, it's really a 4-cylinder platform, this one. And the Passat takes it as far as it can really go in terms of driving dynamics. Now, although it would have been nice to see the top spec Passat upgraded to that sort of 213, 221, 228 kilowatts of power that we routinely see at the top end of the EA888 engine's development in cars like the Audi SQ2 here in Australia. One clear upside to the fact it's retained its 206 kilowatt tune is that Volkswagen Australia have been able to stick with the 6-speed wet clutch DSG Auto, and trust me, the 6-speed is the one you want. It's been around for a long time, its durability is well and truly tested, but the main reason I like it more than the 7-speed is that you really don't need that extra ratio in Australian driving. Instead, the 6-speed just is always in the right gear for our kind of roads. I often find with the 7-speed wet clutch DSG in cars like the new Golf GTI and the 7.5 GTI and R is they are often cruising in 7th if you're in drive, and then when you just demand a bit more power, they really have to sort of think, all right, 6th, 5th, it's just that lag. Whereas with the 6-speed, even 6th gear has really ample torque. That's partially because at 110, the highway limit in Australia, it's cruising at 2,500 RPM, so it's not super low revs, so nor is the fuel economy super low either. But that means you've got plenty of torque underfoot, even in the top cruising gear. Then, when you plant your foot, you get that super quick dual clutch auto reaction straight down to 4th or 3rd, and you're off. So I really like the gearbox, I like the number of gears, I like the calibration of it. Now, the MQB platform being transverse is based around front-wheel drive cars, but this Passat 206 TSI has standard 4Motion, all-wheel drive, Haldex type system. So there is some drive sent to the rear wheels with any throttle application, just a small amount most of the time, but it certainly feels like the tune in the 206 TSI is designed to get torque to those rear wheels fairly quickly. And in fact, you know, if you're on a moist road like this one, you're in the sport mode and you put the stability control into its sport mode, so ESC Sport, and you get on the throttle hard, like assertively, in a corner, you will get power oversteer. Now, that's the sort of thing that should be left to racetracks or to corners with very, very generous radiuses where you just want to give the car a bit of push from the rear end to correct your line. This car will do that. And it's quite like the Golf R in that way. The new Golf R has a drift mode and all that, but the previous one, you could certainly induce it to power oversteer, but you just have to get your modes and your inputs right. Now, of course, when the Passat wagon starts to go on you from the back, you know about it because the wheelbase we've got in this car is long and the whole thing is just gorgeous and supple and talks to you through the chassis. So there really is something for keen drivers here. Similarly with the steering, look, it's certainly not the most feelsome steering in the world, but I really, really like the perfect mid-weighting of the steering. It's not heavy, it's not over light. It feels like it suits the size and shape of this car. Not stupidly muscular for no reason, but nor is it dainty. The ratio in it is also comfortable, fast enough for quick reactions on a spirited drive like this one, but not sort of that lightning fast Peugeot 508 steering that not everybody likes. Then there's the suspension, which is near perfect for Australian B-road conditions. So we've got adaptive dampers with comfort, normal and sport settings, but normal is the way to go. They've done it really well. It used to be that normal wasn't quite right in a Volkswagen and you need to sort of fiddle around with everything, but actually in a rare occasion, everything in this car left to normal is basically what you want, apart from maybe gearbox, which you can chuck into sport on the fly, or you can use these not so lovely plastic paddles on the steering wheel. You just get this lovely flow from the suspension in the Passat. Yes, it's big, yes, it's long, but you don't have kind of float from the suspension. You do get a small instance of float coming off of really big compression, which is, you know, does happen on Australian country roads, but it's sort of one and done. Reminds me of the old General Motors VE/VF Commodore tune, where it was like one and done with a significant bump in the road. You don't have any shimmying or pogoing or anything like that. Similarly, it just rounds off sharp edges really nicely, and I think that's partially a product of the fact that Passat has sensible wheels even in top spec R-Line trim. We're still only on 19s, so yes, it's a big-ish wheel, it looks good, it fills the guards fine, But unlike an Arteon, for example, we're not on 20s, and so we just have that little bit of extra insulation from a bit more rubber, 235, 40 R19 tyres all round. Now, those tyres are only Pirelli Cinturato P7s, oddly, despite Volkswagen's penchant for sticking some pretty aggressive tyres on the Golf GTI and Golf R in the past. We've only got P7s, and look, it's okay, particularly because this car has all-wheel drive. The car will find traction through its electronics, but I do think you could really level up the turn-in on this car by changing out the tyres for something more aggressive, Conti Sports, P0s, Michelin Pilot Sport 4s or 4S. You definitely notice the difference. Similarly, the brakes, not as big as they could be. You could certainly feel it after a very, very spirited descent in this car on the brake quite a lot. You're starting to notice a little bit of fade, but it's better than most other cars this size. So all in all, the Passat 206 R-Line, it comes together as a very, very nice cohesive package. And I will say this car is more comfortable than those all-tracks that I've been driving. If you're a subscriber, you'll know I quite like the new petrol all-track, but they've lifted the all-track a bit further than it was before, and somewhere in that change, the suspension fidget doesn't go away. It's bearable, but you can just tell the suspension's always doing something. Here in the 206 TSI R-Line, on a much more aggressive suspension package, the car finds its groove. And when you're looking at a straight piece of road like the one I'm on now, everything settles down, the car relaxes, and you relax. So this thing is brilliant because it can do the spirited aggressive driving, it can do the calm, relaxed around town stuff, it can do the highway stints with everybody happy in the car and no one even realizing what this thing is capable of. And I find that very, very desirable. And for 70 grand, I think it's a lot of car. I think it's good value. Sure, it's a fairly expensive Volkswagen, but a S4, even a A4 or a 45 TFSI Quattro Estate is going to cost you another 15, 20 grand spec for spec. That's also definitely worth considering. The A4 and the S4, they feel more hewn from granite from this car. There's a few less shifting sounds as you go over bumps. And I like the steering better in the Audi, but it's a lot more expensive. What else? BMW 330i Touring, that's probably my closest rival to this car. I'd probably take the BMW for its rear drive only architecture, but I think that the Passat rides better. And of course, all-wheel drive will suit many people, particularly if you want to go to the snow or whatnot. This car is going to suit much better. Mercedes C43, very cool. We're almost certain the C-Class wagon's going to go away, so that may not be on the table for much longer, but it's very firm. And again, that car's like 40 grand more expensive than this car. So as a sort of all-rounder at a not too pricey cost, there's a lot to be said for the top Passat. Now, safety stuff, it's good, this car, because not only does it have it, which is one thing, the tuning is the other side of the coin, and this is tuned properly. The lane keep assist is subtle, it intervenes when it should, not before, so it lets you actually drive the car, but it does help you out if you've become a little distracted and you have actually bumped that line. It just gently pushes you back to the center of the lane, and you can turn it off very easily just here on the end of this indicator stalk. The adaptive cruise works well, again that's tuned properly. Blind spot, we've got front and rear AEB, that's all good. I would really like to see more people picking up those blind spot cameras that Hyundai use. I got so used to those in my long-term Genesis that I kind of wish all cars had them. But that's another point, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, colour me impressed by this car. When I see them out on the street, I think that person knows what's up. So those are my opinions of the 2021 Volkswagen Passat 206 TSI R-Line Wagon. The best car Volkswagen currently make, at least the best car they currently sell in Australia. It could be displaced by the new Golf R when that arrives early next year, but for now, for me, there's no better VW than this top spec Passat wagon. It's just so good at so many tasks. But that's my view. You can let me know what you think down below in the comments. Is it worth stepping up to something like an A4 or an S4 wagon or a BMW 330i Touring? Would you prefer something like a Stinger at this price? Let me know all your thoughts. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. Don't forget about that email newsletter. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.